Cool. So, hey, I'm Tim. I'm Tim Sims. I'm from Maryland, so I didn't have too far to go. Any Marylanders in the house? Anybody? Okay. Anybody from Columbia area, Howard County? Howard County area? Okay, all right. My neighbor. There you go. Cam, did you come down by train or did you drive? You drove to Metro. Okay. I took the Mark down to the Metro and then came in, so that was pretty fun. So anyway, I'm Tim. I've been in software for a while. We'll talk a little bit about that in just a bit. But I am actually in between gigs, which is another way of saying that I was impacted by a riff. Any riffers out there? Anybody? Okay, there we go. So if you were impacted by a riff since, say, the beginning of the pandemic, let me just see your hands. Okay, a few people. Okay, if you are still looking for employment, okay, raise your hand. Raise your hand. Nothing to be ashamed of. Okay, sweet. So you guys, if you guys have open roles, you see where the folks are who are looking. So definitely make sure that you're connecting with one another. Okay, but like I said, I've been in the game for quite some time. Just a little bit about myself. I love movies, and in particular, there is a specific genre of movie that I really enjoy. In fact, 3 of my top 5 movies are in this particular genre. Now, it'd be easy to just say like sci-fi, but there's a specific type of sci-fi. Because how many of you guys like space type sci-fi movies? Yeah, most of you, right? Yeah, that's not me. That's not me. I'm not into like the outer space or the monsters or the the creatures and stuff. Not me. Sorry. Although I did play D&D as a kid, so who knows how that happened. But the specific genre of movie that I love is the mind-bending sci-fi movies. You guys know what I'm talking about? Okay, there are 3 in particular. We're going to play a little game. Okay, if you think about the mind-bending movies where you get introduced to a concept or to a world that you weren't really expecting, and it just takes your mind a little time in order to assimilate into that, in order to understand the movie. Okay, who has like one of the most mind-bending movies as a suggestion? Yes, right here. Inception. That is one of them. That's one of my favorite movies. That's right. What else? Anybody else? In the back there.
Would being John Malkovich count?
That's pretty good. Didn't make my list. I saw it. It's a good one. It's a good one. Yeah, right here.
Arrival?
Arrival. Anybody see Arrival? Yeah, that's pretty good. What else? Yeah. Tenet. That's one of my 3. Yep. And what about the other one? Yeah, you got to go back a little in time. In fact, this one will be 25 years old as of the end of this month, believe it or not. The Matrix. Thank you. So, this we're going to go backwards in time. You guys know what this one is? Tenet? Anybody see Tenet? Okay, now how many of you only saw Tenet one time? Just raise your hand. Okay, you probably hated it, right? You have to watch Tenet at least 3 times, because the second time it'll take just to acclimate yourself to what's actually happening, and then the 3rd time you actually start taking it in. So that's Tenet. You guys know what this one is? Inception. Yep, with the road going upside down. And then the last one is, of course, The Matrix. Now, why do I share this with you? You will see in just a minute. So, what we're going to talk about here today is just a brief history of web dev. How many OGWDs do we have in the house? OGWD, okay? All right, couple OGWD. You're like, I don't know. You'll learn a little bit about that. Okay, we're going to talk about virtualization and containerization, and then we're going to talk about web containers, and then finally spinning up Node. Okay, so how many of you, just by show of hands, how many of you guys would consider yourselves full stack developers? Full stack. Okay, awesome. Okay, now typically, even by saying that you're full stack, you have some sort of slight or some sort of bent, right? Like either you're really passionate about front end or really passionate about back end. How many of you guys would you say you're really passionate about front end engineers? Okay, raise them high, just want to say, okay, so it's a little more than half the room. How about back end? How many of you guys, oh wow, not too many of you. Okay, so for how many of you guys are using Node right now in order to develop applications? This could be front end or full stack or back end engineers. containers. Okay, sweet. Most of you guys are familiar with it. Okay, so we're going to talk about that. So let's get started here and talk a little bit about the web dev. And I said the OGWD. Okay, so did start a long time ago, but not so much a galaxy far, far away. But if you are an OGWD, then you remember that back in the day, okay, all of the web processing, okay, all of your application processing happened where? On the server, right? It's all server side. How many of you guys know what CGI bin is? Anybody? Okay, there we go. Now we're talking OGWDs right there. So how did we develop these applications? Well, most of the time we developed these applications on the server, okay? Or we were sending data to the server. So you guys remember WSFTP, or you remember PuTTY, and it's not like silly PuTTY, right? Or then Xterm, which was a way to actually get onto a server but export your views back to your own client machine, okay? The point is that it was all about getting data, even in a development environment, development phase, getting that data onto the server where the processing would take place, and then you could sort of manipulate that as it were. And obviously, like, there were different technologies that came out, including like JavaScript, of course, like circa 1995, I think it was. And slowly but surely, like, processing was more capable on the client side, right? And we started getting more need to develop from the front end. So, but we still had back-end technology. So, you know, someone came up with a great idea. What about virtualization? How can we not have to develop in a development environment on a different machine, but how can we develop on our own machine? And that's when VMware VirtualBox came about. Everyone is probably familiar with this, OS virtualization, just basically being able to run that Linux machine or run that other machine locally within your computer, and then just being able to manipulate that locally without having to go outside. And this was revolutionary for web developers, right? Because now I could be developing while I'm on a plane, or I could be developing while I don't have internet connectivity, or I could be, you know, testing this in different ways without actually having to be tethered to the server. But nowadays, how many of you guys have Docker? You guys run in Docker, okay? This is kind of de facto standard, right? Docker, containerization, okay? What's containerization? What's containerization? Anybody? Lightweight virtualization, that's a good way to think of it. It's taking the application, right, and packaging it up so it's portable. You don't have to worry about configurations, you don't have to worry about what the compatibility is. You can just run your application, containerize it, and run it on whatever platform you need to. Okay, so now why is this important? It's important because we're now in a place where we can do this same type of containerization, but completely within the browser. Okay, so you're familiar with web workers, probably. Anybody familiar with web workers? Just basically background processes that are running JavaScript, right, away from the main thread. So you can process lots of computationally expensive things without affecting the performance of the web page. And so what web containers is just simply it's a web worker that's running some type of WASM or WebAssembly. Okay, you guys know WebAssembly? Anybody? Okay, WebAssembly is it's a language a few years old now, where your code, whatever native language you're building in, can be compiled down to assembly code or byte code so that it can run within the context of the browser, okay? And we'll get into this in just a second here. But this is the concept of web containers, okay? A portable method for being able to run code that's, you know, in any language, okay, in a way that's sandboxed, basically, within your browser. Okay, and so this is all the lead up to what we're going to talk about, and that is Stack Blitz, okay? Is there anybody who's familiar with Stack Blitz? Okay, a couple people, awesome. Okay, so we're going to talk a little bit about this, and you're probably wondering what is StackBlitz. Unfortunately, no one can be told what StackBlitz is. You have to see it for yourself. Okay, so this is where we're going to do a little bit of exercise here. So if you would, if you want to work with me here, here's a link here to a GitHub repo, and it has a couple of links on it. I'm going to show that to you, but if you want to follow along, that would be the best way to do it. Okay, so let me get out of this and go over here. Okay, so a couple things. If you're going to participate, then you can go ahead and do the sign. It's not required that you do the get started here to sign up for an account, but if you want to do some of the live coding here, then that'll be important. So, in a nutshell, what's StackBlitz? StackBlitz is an IDE, okay, that runs fully contained within your browser, okay?
Can you show the URL again?
Oh, yep. Sorry, let's go back to it. github.com/tsims/ft-spinupnode. I don't know why I didn't just do front runners, but that's for another day. So that's the link right there. It'll take you to this page right here, and you'll see a couple links, okay? All right, we're getting to that in just a second. So, it's an IDE. So, what can you do with this IDE? Glad you asked. So, how many of you guys were in the last session with, Chris was in the last session, right? He was talking a little bit about, what, solid.js, right?
Right.
One of the things I love about StackBlitz is it's a great way to tinker or experiment with other babies, like he said, right? So once you get in here, you can choose any of these templates, essentially, and these are templates that can quickly spin up that environment. So let me demonstrate that for you real quick. So that was solid.js. Want to spin up a full solid.js environment? Boom, like that. It's simple. Now, I'll show you what is actually happening. We are completely within my web browser right here, okay? There's nothing that was installed on my computer, okay? So it's a great way to be able to do prototyping or sending different pieces of code or applications to other users. Talk a little bit about that in just a second. And voila, I got a solid.js implementation. And just so you know, so there's a real working terminal, like obviously we got files here as well. And let's see, let's go into app.jsx, and if I wanted to learn solid, I can say learn solid now. Save it, boom, and it's reactive, right? That's what he said. Cool. So what else can you do? So that's just a simple example of like any of these templates. You can certainly play around with that. So for my back-end developers, if you were interested in picking up Nitro, that's a new technology there, or Nest.js, then you can do that. What's also cool, I said that the web containers are running WebAssembly, right? So WebAssembly can run any type of native language. So let's go to native languages. Not any, there's some work that needs to be done, but here's a Python example, where you probably never realized that you could run Python directly in your browser without having to install anything. So this is, let's do Python. And there we go, hello Python, it just ran Python, okay? Now, it's, so Python itself, the application, is compiled down to WebAssembly. That's how that is actually working, okay? So it's not running the Python executable as it would be installed on your computer, but it's actually WebAssembly running that. Okay, so that's all fine and good. Let's do one more example here. Let's go to mobile front-end. We had a bunch of front-end folks. So talked about that. How about, actually, there is one that you want to do. And anybody into GraphQL? Some GraphQL? Okay, so anybody ever interested in learning GraphQL if you don't know it? Okay, well, guess what? Click on GraphQL here, and instantaneously you've got a GraphQL environment that's actually running, and you can, quickly. It's cool. You just refresh your web browser, and the environment resets back to whatever the original state is. So you can play around with it all you want, and there's no consequence of making changes there. Okay, so tinkering, that's one thing that you can certainly do. But I wanted to show you guys something else. That is, okay, so so that was the first link there, stackblitz.com. If you're on this page right here, here's what I want you to do. Well, StackBlitz has something really cool that you can do here for any GitHub repository. If you want to open any repository up without having to install anything, clone anything onto your computer, you just do stackblitz.com/ and then a little tilde there with the rest of the path, and you immediately get thrown into an IDE for that repository, okay? Guess what? You can do that for feature branches or other things. Like, how many of you guys have struggled with having to stash away changes that you had because you want to run someone else's code or someone else's branch? Well, this is a great way to do it. Just run it directly in the browser, and you don't have to. You can have multiple browser tabs open. Okay, one with your code and one with whoever the other code is coming from, and you can run those simultaneously, compare changes or whatever it is that you need to do. Okay, so. This is a completely, it's a complete environment, okay? So I did want to hammer that home a little bit more. And to do that, so, you guys use VS Code, I assume? Like most people use VS Code these days, okay. So you know that there is vscode.dev, right? Like maybe you guys are thinking like, how is that different than a web development? Well, this is, if you go to a terminal here, okay, and you say open up a terminal, terminals are not available in the web editor. It's because the web browser can't run the whatever terminal commands you have, okay? So that's why that happens. However, here I've got, again, within the browser, I can do like all sorts of commands. I can look at things, I can go to server, I can do an npm install. There, it's going to do all the installation directly within the browser. I can view, all my modules that I have. I can go into files. I can edit files. I can even go in and install extensions if I wanted to as well. So you got the full VS Code support there within StackBlitz. Okay, so. Need to acclimate you to this code base here, and then we're going to do the exercise that we're building up to. All right, so this is just a simple chat server. And actually, before I do that, let's just do npm run hello. So this is just going to run this console log statement. Boom, there you go, okay? And obviously, you can just to demonstrate. Okay, and I can run it again, and boom, it's actually running Node within the browser. Okay, so that was a simple example. Now, the chat server. Just take it. Can you guys? Can you guys see this? Okay. Okay. All right. All right. So let's see. So in this file, the important things are it's going to open up a socket connection for new participants, and with that, it's going to accept messages that come in, and it's going to apply it on the screen. So let me demonstrate it first, and then we'll walk through it a little bit more specifically. So for this guy, chat. By the way, StackBlitz is running web containers. One of the challenges with well, it's a blessing and a curse, is that it's running a sandbox, okay? So it doesn't have access to local I/O, okay? So StackBlitz provides the the plumbing to be able to make it so that you can communicate back and forth within the web container. So in this particular case, okay, so I got a server running on the 3010, and let's go over here, just open this up on this side right here. Okay, so it's just a simple app right here. I can say testing 2, 3. Okay, so that's pretty cool. Another. All right, and I can also, let's launch that over in a new tab as well. All right, and let's say Chad. Okay, so Chad's joined now, and this is a message from Chad. Okay, pretty cool, right? So again, running completely within the browser. I've got my Node server, and I've got a front-end interface for that as well. Okay, one of the cool things about the fact that this is running within the browser is I get access to DevTools. Okay, you guys use Chrome DevTools? Probably, right? So if we go, let me go back into the file, server chat, okay? This function right here is where the messages come in. So let's open up Debugger. You guys familiar with Debugger? Okay. So I'm gonna open up the DevTools. Run it. And okay, so it's, come on. There we go. Okay, so let's do Steve. And let's say Steve is going to say hi there. Okay, now this is going to be hard to read, so let me just expand this a little bit. And sure enough, like execution has paused within the server code, okay? But I'm seeing it within my browser, so I can do all the debugging that I need to do. I can inspect variables, I can like set breakpoints, I can do all sorts of things like that. I can see the local stack or the global stack or what have you. And all the things that you would expect within a debugger. So again, without having to install anything, it's running completely within the browser. All right, so you guys with me so far? Okay, cool. So before I transition to this next part here, what sort of use cases can you imagine for teams being able to leverage Stack Blitz in a way that you're running full development environment within the browser? Anything? Yeah.
Develop on different devices like an iPad.
Yep, exactly. You can develop, you're not tethered to a specific machine, okay? So that can help with giving you a little freedom of where and how you actually develop. That's a great one. What else? Yep.
I had a designer ask for a way that he could play with our design system a little bit.
Yeah.
And I think this would be perfect for sending it to him and spin it up real fast.
Yeah, the comment was for designers or anyone who's not in engineering, it's a great way to showcase the design system or the application that you have in whatever state it is. It's great for UAT testing, right? Like user acceptance testing for like if you have a QA team or if you've got like customers that you want to put something in front of, then that's a great way to do that. Anything else before we move on? Yes, in the back.
So it helps you identify dependencies on your machine that might interfere with your app.
Yeah. You guys use, I assume that you've got like build processes for your systems. And if you have a DevOps team, that's great, okay? But how long do you think it takes to like script out every single thing that needs to happen on every single machine? And then if there's a change, then it obviously breaks everything. So yeah, that's absolutely the case. Like you can track the different dependencies that you have for the system. That's great. Okay, so if there we go. When you look at your totem, you know beyond a doubt you're not in someone else's dream. Okay, let me show you. So, what we've been looking at is StackBlitz presenting an IDE for your application. What if you wanted to not have the IDE presented? So if I were to deploy this section of code, okay, then there's no web containers, right? Like I deploy it and someone pulls it down from GitHub, let's say. If they just clone it and then run it, then they can just run it, okay? No web containers, that makes sense. But what if I wanted to actually give my end user access to what's happening on both the front end and the back end and the server, okay? A little confusing. But what I'm proposing is web containers, okay? There's an API for web containers. So I don't have to have StackBlitz in order to run a web container. I can set up a container. I wrote this simple function right here. It's a module basically, but it uses the web container API in order to stand up a web container instance. So the steps for that are pretty straightforward, pretty simple, and you can get that from webcontainers.io, the website. But there's a webcontainer.boot, okay? And then once the web containers is booted, you can load files, because again, you can't, there's I/O, but yeah, there's nothing on the web container once you boot it up. So you have to load it up with whatever data or whatever files that you need. So I've got a function for that. And then after that, you can execute commands, just like you're spawning commands basically. And then finally, you are waiting on a server ready. So after you instantiate the web container, then there are just a few steps that you need to make in order to get the server, whatever is actually supposed to be running on that, running. So a lot of talk, but let me just show you what that looks like. And this is where the exercise will come in. Let me see. Do I need to take, okay, so this, we're going to go back over here. And for this, let's go to, looks like a blank page. Oh yeah, so we got to refresh. Beautiful thing is refresh and everything's back to square one. Okay, so I'm waiting for this to load up. Okay, so that's V. So you can see in my console log all the steps that are taking place as this process of setting up the web container is happening. So there's a series of files. It's just basically going to take all the files that are in this folder. It's actually going to load these from GitHub. So that was, let me just see. Oh yeah, here we go. So it's loading it from this, wherever the link was for the GitHub repo. And that matches all these files that we were just looking at before. Okay, so that's what this is doing. And then it's running npm install to get all the modules down. And then finally, it says server is running, server is ready. Server is ready, okay? So why am I not seeing anything? Well, let me just uncomment this right here, which is going to load up chat frame. Going through the steps of doing all that again, and boom, now I have, oh, I didn't show you the index, so there's a chat frame div basically, and I can maybe I created. Let's do 100%. It's gonna go through the process of instantiating again. Oh, my CSS skills are lacking here. So yeah, you have to actually give it an actual dimension. Okay, yep. Lost it, sorry. Yep, fine. Oh, it's not right. Sorry. All right, so that'll load up. So what we're doing here is running the node server, okay, within the browser, and still, like, who knows? Actually, let me just see something real quick. See where that is. Yeah, my body isn't large enough is the problem, so I could extend that. But point is that, oh, you know what it is? Figured it out. That is because doesn't matter. Point is that the Node.js server is running within here. Let's do Tom. And if I had a good interface, then you would see that. So this is the output from the server. That, in other words, all I'm doing is loading an iframe that points back into the server once the server gets launched. Okay, so got the server running, I got this running. The other thing that we could do is this output that's showing in the console log, we could create a text area here and output all of the commands from the server directly on the web page, so you can actually see like all the things that are happening. So if you have actual output, then rather than having to go to console log in order to see it, you could display it like right there on the screen. Okay, so a little bit of a inception moment here because we're actually still in StackBlitz, but we're building an application that uses a web container. But StackBlitz is also in a container, so that container has output, and it can get a little bit confusing as far as like if you put a debug statement in, how do you know what level that debug statement is actually firing? Like where are we coming from? Fortunately, there's some good clues as far as like what that is. You'll see the file names here, and if you see a StackBlitz, well, these are all util.js, so it's not going to tell you a whole lot, other than the fact it's right here. But if there is something that's happening on the server, then you'll see it as a StackBlitz message here. And again, you can do the same sort of debugging that you would have done like if you were just using it directly in StackBlitz. So now you can deploy actual server and client-side implementations for things like prototyping, or things like where you want to provide the full environment, but you don't necessarily want to give or overwhelm users with an IDE to be able to use it. Okay, you just give whatever display it is, and it can run self-contained. You can communicate back and forth without ever having to go to a server. Okay. All right, well, that's it. Any questions on any of this stuff? Yeah.
How would you compare this to GitHub Code Spaces? Have you tried GitHub Code Spaces?
I have not.
Okay.
I have not.
Very similar.
Okay.
That conforms to the dev container spec, and it's really similar. So if you have a chance,
That's cool.
check it out.
GitHub, what's it called again?
Code Spaces.
Code Spaces. Okay. And that comes with every repository, or? Okay.
We
Sweet.
got an allotment every month of a certain number of compute hours.
I see.
Not person hours, compute hours.
I see. And that runs within the
Very, very similar.
Awesome. Awesome. Thank you for that. Yeah.
So when you launch it and it's spin up, Is that link accessible by others?
Ooh, that's a great question. So it's sandboxed, okay? So it's not accessible by others, which is why, so StackBlitz has, I mentioned that there's some plumbing that goes on there, but it's limited to just the browser that you're actually on. And you have to go through, like you have to connect to it. So there was a link here, oh, this link right here, you can see. If I try to open this up in a different window here, this is just an incognito window. It's going to say connect the project. Couldn't find the project, okay, because it's not accessible to anyone else. Only the web browser where it's actually running. Okay. Yep.
What are the sort of practical implications for instance, like if you were running on a staging environment or a dev environment, you would have things set up for like environmental variables, like your auth0 tenants and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Like pretty, I guess auth0 is the perfect example. Like if you needed to share a link to one of these containers in StackBlitz with a project manager for acceptance testing.
Yeah.
And that then running in their browser, it needs to tie in with your auth0.
Yeah. Yep, so a couple of things that come to mind. One, a lot of times like mock servers are acceptable for that. So you would sort of provide the functionality where like you've got a hard-coded like login. But again, like you're just logging into the local system. So like being able to bypass that for your test mode would be the way to do it. But you bring up a great point, and that is like test runners would be a great application for this as well, where it's like you just run it like within the browser and don't have to worry about like any of the dependencies or compatibility or anything.
So the main approach would just be to use cardboard cutouts to just completely disconnect your.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. I mean, it can communicate out, okay, but you run into the same sort of challenges that you might run into with CORS, cross-origin resource sharing, right? So, there's some things that you can do in order to work around that, but yeah, that's what you would do. Yes, last question. Yeah, I tried that. So so those tools like require Chrome in order for it to work, and it has to have a headless Chrome or what have you. Until there is a Chrome that's compiled to WASM, that would be possible. Okay, but I can tell you that the Python enhancement was something the StackBlitz folks just added within the last 6 months or so. So they're always like looking at ways, and that was actually a use case that I was looking for as well, like being able to do visual testing based on something like a Playwright or other testing tool. All right, let me just give you my contact info if you're interested in diving in more. There's my QR code there. Boom. But thank you guys so much. Really appreciate being here and all your attention. Really appreciate it. Enjoy the rest of the show.